Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Lost One podcast. Joining me today, we just have Shoshima.
Just me.
Yeah, just him. Hence why we have the kind of the more narrow focused, and I don't look nearly as tiny.
Because I am not big.
Yeah. No, not really. Like,
secretly, Shenzo just wants me to look big, so if you ever see me in person, I'm just a small boy.
well, it's setting up expectations, right? And you know what they say about expectations.
You're disappointed?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, actually, that's exactly what they say. Yeah. So anyway, guys, I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't really have anything planned for this episode.
Yeah, I called Shenzo earlier. I'm like, hey, what do you want to talk about? He's like, I don't got shit.
Yeah, I don't got shit. That's not exactly what I said, but it's pretty close. It's close enough for government work anyway. But yeah, so the truth is, we're recording this at the end of March. I believe it's the 29th.
Yes.
Yeah. And so this episode won't come out probably till like May. But
hey, it still starts with M. I get them mixed up all the time. So
I know, right? But yeah, basically yesterday I ended up having to go back to the office for the first time in 3 years.
Yeah.
And I was literally there for a half hour, like of actual work.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 5 hours in the car that they had to pay me for, plus gas. So out of my 3 hour day, I spent 5 hours in the car and a half hour meeting, and I answered like 2 emails. So it was a really productive day yesterday for me.
Seems legit. Sounds like government work.
Yeah, except for I don't work for the government.
No, I know.
So, yeah, but so I was basically just really tired, and I actually forgot to send out a text to Shoshima and Samurai about like, hey, are we gonna like record the podcast until like yesterday? And Samurai was like, nope, I can't, got work.
Yeah, actually, it was me that sent out the text.
Yeah,
I was
you
trying
did.
to figure out life things.
Yeah.
And
I was
planning.
Like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I'm good.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for the correction. You're right. I stand corrected.
My bad.
No, dude, you're good.
Yeah.
I appreciate the correction. Call me out on that shit. That's what I told Chad James you do. So don't make me a liar to Chad James.
But yeah, Samurai had life stuff.
Yeah, he has like real work stuff that he's working on. And so he's not here today. But so you're stuck with the two of us. Which
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, again, deepest apologies.
We apologize now for the quality of this podcast.
Yeah. But Shoshima, actually, this is Shoshima's brainchild today, and I thought it was a really, really good topic. I had a couple other ones that we might float around later, but this is something we've kind of addressed a couple times, like we talked about in the Resident Evil pod a lot, about like the remakes and the reboots and remastered, and how there seems to be like a lot of discourse about like what makes what.
Yeah.
So we figured, hey, let's talk about that, because that's not going away anytime soon.
No.
And at the time of this recording, RE4 came out less than a week ago.
Yeah.
So we're here, kind of right after RE4 Remake, and we figured, hey, this is a topical thing that probably will age well into May.
Just like RE4.
Yeah, unlike some of the comments we talked about with Jonathan Majors, which, well, I'll probably have to record a little something for that, but. Yeah, we're not going to dive into that today. So yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check TMZ.
Oh.
I'll just say that. So,
I'll have to go on TMZ later.
Yeah, but anyway, so today we're going to talk more about, what makes kind of a remake, a reboot, a port, and a remaster.
Yeah.
And we're just going to talk about, some of the different games, because that definitely seems to be a recurring trend among game developers right now. Is in addition to releasing new games, they're also like re-releasing old ones.
Yeah, I think, they've always ported stuff over.
Yeah.
But there's just been a resurgence of these remakes just making gangbusters. And everybody trying to get in and like get a piece of the pie.
Yeah, and then like some companies selling a remaster as a remake, or a remake as a remaster. And
I feel like there's a lot of, there's no like, legend or... What's
strict definition?
Yeah, or a strict definition that everyone like can use.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have my personal definition.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're on the same page as me.
Yeah. And so we'll just kind of define real quick what we believe these terms are. So what sets apart a remaster from a remake, at least in my opinion, is whether or not the game was built from scratch again. Remakes, I always imagine, even if they don't necessarily change anything significant about the game, if they have to remake the entire game from scratch because either the source code was lost or whatever reason, that is a remake. Period. End of story.
Does that make Kingdom Hearts, what was it, in the 1 a remaster?
Chain, 1 and Chain of Memories, yeah, both.
Yeah, because they lost the source code.
So yeah, technically, by my definition, yes. I know some people will argue that's not like what people think of with remake, but I look at it, for those that don't know, I'm a developer, like full time. It's what I do. So I'm looking at things from the back end. That's how I define things. Back end for a computer, you numbskull.
Oh.
Yeah. But so for me, like, that's what sets it apart. Whereas like a remaster is when they like just upgrade like graphics, or they basically pretty it up.
Yeah, they take the same base code, but then put in some more work.
Yeah, maybe update the art with replace like the resources essentially, rather than the entire like code base and rebuild the game from scratch and update it and maybe change the story. It's literally just, here's the same game, but we made it look prettier. That's what I define as a remaster. So when I hear like HD remaster, I think of like, I don't know, I'd say like Spyro's trilogy that just came out, where they literally took all the same games and they just updated all of the models and the levels and, basically all of the visual assets. So that's what I think of when I think of like a remaster, is I think of like Spyro, where they literally took the game and were like, hey, let's just pretty it up.
Fundamentally the same game.
Yeah.
But just, it runs on current consoles, and it's not on a PS1 anymore, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
On those Spyro games, at least.
So that's at least how I define both. So again, just to rephrase, a remaster is if they literally are building up the source code and everything from scratch, or they're making modifications and changing things up enough to the source code without just upgrading like the graphics, for example. That's the difference for me between a remake and a remaster.
Yeah.
What about you, Shoshima? What's your personal definition there?
Yeah, for me, like a full like remake is when they basically make it for like the current audience. There's been a couple games lately.
RE2 remake.
Yeah, there's like RE2, even RE3, even though people don't like it, it still is a remake.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Final Fantasy 7.
7.
Yeah.
7's in its really own like special weird boat because it's a remake / sequel.
Slash reboot.
/ reboot. Like, it's its own spiritual successor.
It really is in a lot of ways.
But yes, that, and then even remasters. In my opinion, the new Pokemon Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl.
Yeah, that's a remake.
That's, in my opinion, it's just a remaster.
Oh, it's a remaster.
Still faithful, like, recreation. It still has the same problems as the old game. They haven't like updated it like for current.
Okay, I don't know. Did they use the same source code for that, or did they completely rebuild it from scratch?
No, it's different because it's even a different company that made it.
Okay.
Technically.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as like how much work they put into it, they just kind of like copy it, not literally copy and paste it, because that's been a whole thing in Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like people yelling at each other that all they do is copy and paste.
I mean, that is kind of what they do, though. Like, I love Pokemon to death, but like, all the games basically have the same core fundamentals to them, with some exceptions, but HM badges, Elite Four, and then do extra stuff after you beat.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, as far as
it's the MCU formula, guys.
It's
the MCU formula.
No, a lot of
but
people,
it's for Pokemon. It's way older than the MCU formula.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying like they just Control C, Control
V,
like even the assets. So like that's what I'm getting at personally.
So I think there's a point there, but I think that's really oversimplifying.
Yes,
things.
No, it is. It's horrible. Yes. No, because in my opinion, there was Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. That is a remaster, a remake.
Yeah.
Because they updated it. They had Mega Pokemon.
See, we're getting tripped up already, and we just started.
I know. They both start with R, and words are hard. But
no, they both start with REM.
Yeah.
REMA. So it's like they're both Rema, and then after that, it's all up to the tongue.
But yeah, right. And then if I mentioned Crisis Core, that's totally a remaster because it's still just the same cheesy dialogue. They didn't even update the script. They just, here's your script. They got new actors for various reasons we don't have to get into here.
Yeah, and see, that's where I will disagree with you, is that I understand why you say it's a remaster, because they didn't change anything fundamentally about the game, but they had to recast and re-record voice lines. Yeah. So that goes beyond just like prettying it up. Although that is kind of the gray area, though, because audio sources, it's, again, like my definition before is, did they change more at the core source code level, or did they just change the audio and the visual resources?
You think of it more from, the developer standpoint,
Yeah.
and I think of it more as the gameplay standpoint.
And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from, right? In these discussions online, is because, like anything on the internet, you make a statement and you will have a good number of people agree with the statement and a good number disagree.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of disagreeing.
Well, that's what the internet's made for, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Hi, Twitter. Good to see you out there, by the way.
The dumpster fire that is known as Twitter.
Oh, God, which is only becoming more of a dumpster fire by the day.
Yeah. That's a different subject.
Yeah, and then they're dealing with those AI deepfakes now. Have you seen those?
I've seen some, yes.
Oh man! So, yeah, apparently a bunch of people got fooled by a pope in a really like poofy jacket, and then the best thing I saw about this article, and the reason I bring it up is because they interviewed the person who made it. They like tracked down the person who made it, and apparently the dude did it while he was like tripping out on shrooms.
Sounds about right.
Which is both hilarious and terrifying that he could make such a convincing deepfake of such a popular figure while he was
horribly inebriated,
twisted out of his mind on mushrooms.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a very interesting article headline to read. But, yeah, so it's like that's where a lot of, I think, the confusion gets is like their definition is it a remake if it changes the fundamental gameplay, which is how you're approaching it, or is it a remake if they're literally remaking the game, because that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that's, again, so it really comes down to semantics, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because even some of the developers, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl was a faithful remake, but at the same time, like, it still was the same game with the same problems. Like,
yeah, and it just looks nicer.
Yeah.
So, like, that technically falls under, like, oh, they just really cleaned up the visual assets.
Yeah, and to me, it's more of a remaster. It's you can still play the same game, but on current hardware.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I mean, we'd even go back further, and it's technically a glorified port, which is what a lot of remasters are. Like, remasters are just ports, but with prettier graphics or
yeah, that was kind
of,
my, like, tier list of today per se, because you have the bottom, you have ports, which it's usually speaking just the same game, but they get it to run on different hardware.
Yeah, pretty much. It's literally, hey, they're like a great example is like what Nintendo used to do with like their Super Nintendo titles and Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. They literally like, here's the exact same game, but we're just going to put it onto
we're just going to put it somewhere else.
We're going to put it mobile now.
Yeah.
So they literally ported it over to a mobile console.
Yeah.
They didn't upgrade anything. They didn't change anything. They just put it on a different style cartridge, and we're like, here you go. We're going to resell it again for you for like $30.
Yep. And yeah, my first memory of that is Link to the Past.
Link to the Past is a great one. Mine was going to be Super Mario Brothers, where they created like it was fundamentally the same game, but they added like a couple like extra like mini games to it as well. So it was like the Super Mario Brothers Deluxe for Game Boy Color.
Yeah. I remember a lot of Super Mario Brothers 2, like the American version. I played a lot of that on Game Boy.
Oh boy, we're gonna have to do a podcast specifically on Super Mario Brothers 2 one of these days.
Just only okay. I'm down.
Just specifically talking about the absolute shit show that Super Mario Brothers 2 is among the Super Mario Brothers community.
Oh yeah, because that gets into a whole localization debate.
That's like a full podcast by itself. So, but yeah,
you have ports are kind of at the bottom. And then you had those HD remasters that was really popular back in the PS3 and 360 era.
Yeah, where they were literally just like taking games from like their previous generation of consoles and then just
they were
updating them to the new graphics.
Yeah, they were like taking PS1 or usually PS2 games for the most part, porting it over to the PS3 and Xbox 360, slapping an HD code on it, and calling it a day.
Yeah.
I mean, in their defense, it was usually like $40 for 3 games.
Yeah, that's
on average. So
yeah, that was back when video games didn't cost $70 per game.
Correct. It was $60 per game.
That was also around the same era that Nintendo actually offered discounts on some of their games, which has not happened since.
I mean, unless it's Mario Day.
Yeah, but even then, like when we say discounts, we're talking like they were offering games for like $20.
Oh, okay.
Versus like
$20 off, which is what I spent on Mario Day.
Yeah, well, it was like but it was like $5 per game. So, like, yeah, like a Nintendo sale, like 10% is really good now. Let alone like a 30% cut at the time.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. But
yeah,
you had a whole bunch of those HD remakes, they called them.
HD, HD.
Because we mentioned the Silent Hill one they did back in the day, Devil May Cry.
Yeah, it was like the HD collections is the way they referred to them as. And it was usually like 2 or 3 games together that had slightly prettier graphics to match the graphics of the current, at the time, the current generation of consoles, which was like the 360, the PS3, and then the GameCube / Nintendo Wii.
And then
there weren't a lot of HD remakes on Nintendo consoles.
We did have Metroid Prime.
Yeah, Metroid Prime was like, I think, the exception. There was like a handful of them, but like comparatively speaking.
Yeah, because there was those. No, I think they started porting stuff on the Wii U, huh?
Yeah, they did.
As far as, but those were even single games. But yeah,
there's
those, and then I have the remasters, which is still like more work, and they actually like more, as you're saying, still made a new game.
Yeah.
But the whole gameplay, story, everything is just the same.
Yeah.
It's just the same game but on current hardware.
Yep.
And then there's the remake, which goes above and beyond, makes it. I mean, they change stuff so it's more either PC, not talking about, Ashley's tits.
Yeah.
Like they did in RE4 back in the day in 05.
Oh, I remember that.
And just doing stuff like that, making it more acceptable.
Yeah.
And even just, fleshing stuff out more.
Yeah.
Or
even fundamentally changing core aspects of the gameplay. We mentioned RE3 earlier, like Nemesis was a big part of that, where Nemesis was in the original. We talked about in the RE pod, chased you all around, and you could like force them to retreat. But in the remake, they just turned that into cutscenes, and that was a big criticism for the RE3 remake.
Correct.
But yeah, I think you kind of summed it up pretty well. Remasters are, there's a lot more work that goes into a remaster, I think, than a HD remake did at the time. Of course. But the difference between a remaster and a remake isn't always so clear, and like we said, there is that kind of fundamental like disagreement in interpretation.
There's more semantics between those two.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where I think a lot of people get tripped up, because again, as we talked about, subtlety and semantics don't really play well on the internet.
Because there's even the Tales of Symphonia HD remaster.
Yeah.
That just came out, and it runs at 30 frames a second.
Yeah, so it's not even 60 frames.
Which back in the day on the GameCube it was.
Yeah.
So there's been a whole thing about that.
So it's a downgrade, yeah. Yeah.
It like strictly runs worse on new hardware, even though, they made it look better, but it's still the same general like graphical style, or the way the style that the graphics are. I forget the better word for it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, but it's like not the cel-shaded graphics, but the...
just the way they did the graphics. Like, it's still like chibi characters when you're in the overworld, and, better when you're in combat.
Yeah, so there really isn't any improvements. It's actually a downgrade in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like, it looks graphically better, but it's not like it's not, Resident Evil 4 or Final Fantasy 7 Remake, where it's, like, literally taking your system, everything it has, just to, like, have those graphics.
Yeah.
Like, there's no rhyme or reason other than just they didn't feel like making it work. Probably because they used the same base code for some reason, and it didn't play nice at 60.
Yeah, it's something, because I don't want to get like into the technicals, but like a lot of people are like, oh, why can't you just like upgrade this to like 60 frames? Well, that would probably involve them redoing the whole thing, and the studio probably didn't want to spend the time or the money doing that.
I think on one of the games they switched on the Switch collection, the $50 expansion pack.
Yeah.
It's Balloon something like, but
Balloon Fighter or
something like that. I'd have to look at it. But because it has a higher frame rate, one of the bonus levels is like impossible.
Yeah.
Because it was tied to frame rate.
Yeah.
And then now it's like twice as much, and you just can't.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of the problem with like doing like a straight up port. And is that as hardware is accelerated, like it's a big part of the reason why like a lot of older games have had to be re-released or re-updated, because they were tied into like specific hardware limitations, and in some ways they exploited hardware limitations. So, it's something that we've talked about this before in previous pods, but like it's a big part of like what makes a game like a remaster, a remake, a port. What sets them apart is largely dependent on interpretation of who's buying them. And sometimes it devolves into like a giant semantics fight. Other times people have like legitimate points though. And again, that's kind of why we wanted to talk about it today, is because this is extremely relevant with the number of games that are being remastered or remade. And one of which is like Last of Us, which has caused a stir.
Yes.
Not because of anything that the game did, but because of how quickly the game was re-released after it was re-released previously, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely something where like they have the original Last of Us, which came out like what, in like 2013.
Yeah.
And here we are like a decade later, and it's been released twice since then.
They actually, I think, just as of this recording, it's been released 3 times.
3 times.
Because the PC port just finally came out.
Oh yeah.
Which is technically still the same as what they call the Part 1 remake.
Yeah.
So
it's
that's,
just
again, what semantics you want to get into for that.
It's a pure port.
Yeah.
Of the remake.
Yes.
Not the original game.
Yeah, because you had the original game.
Hi, Tanner.
Then they called it Last of Us Part... No, I think just Last of Us Remastered.
Yeah,
Last
of Us
no Part
Remastered,
2 yet.
Yeah, because Part 2 was still in development.
Yeah, so it was just Last of Us Remastered on the PS4, which was just very minor graphical updates, but then that one at least did come with the DLC left behind.
Yeah, which was pretty cool.
So...
For those that might have missed the hype train on the original release.
Yes, I know personally... excuse me. I never got the DLC or played it, so it was, a nice addition for me.
Yeah.
And of course, I think I waited till it was on sale too. I didn't buy it right away.
Yeah, and now they have Last of Us Remastered.
Yeah, Last of Us Part 1 Remastered is the official.
And that's where a lot of this debate, at least where I started hearing about this online debate between like remaster and remake, is they're calling it like a remaster or a...
So it says remake on the game.
So it's remake on the game, but it's like people are like, it's a remaster.
Yes, no,
It's literally just they touched up some of the graphics. Nothing about the core gameplay has changed.
No, core gameplay is the same. They actually specifically didn't want to change it to similar to how Last of Us Part 2 plays, because it would just throw off the whole pacing of the game, which I get it. It makes sense.
Yeah, I get that too,
But they released it again, called it a remake instead of a remaster, just because they already used the naming convention remaster.
Yeah, for the first one, which was accurate.
Yes.
But then they kind of just did it again.
And then they were selling it for a full $70 when it launched as well.
Yeah, which was another big issue. And that's, I guess, where a lot of like this debate comes down to, is it's like it does feel like certain studios and certain game companies are just kind of like blurring the lines between remake and remaster in order to just make extra money. And, that's fine. They have the right to do that, right?
Yeah, because, again, it's mostly semantics, legally speaking.
But, just for me personally, my opinion is a game shouldn't be quote-unquote remade unless it's at least 2 generations old, let alone, like, 1. And so that's kind of like my biggest pet peeve with Last of Us Remastered is...
Yeah.
It really doesn't come across as a remaster because I don't think they rebuilt the game from scratch. I don't think so. So it throws my definition out to start. But then in addition, it's like, yeah, the graphic updates are pretty cool, but to me that almost... It kind of harkens back to those HD remakes you mentioned. Like, that's kind of what it feels like for this one. So it doesn't even feel like a real remaster to me because they didn't up anything else. It was just, we're just going to basically improve the graphics, title it something, and sell it for $70.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion on the matter.
Yeah.
The one on the PS4, the remaster, was like the HD collection update. It was same base game, but they slapped on some more code.
Well, now instead of using HD collection, they're using remaster as a...
Correct. I'm just saying
as their newest keyword.
Yeah, but as far as like my tier that I went through earlier, I would more put that like as an HD upgrade.
Okay, so HD. So you would go with the HD upgrade.
Would have been that PS4, and
the new one is the remaster.
In my opinion, because I think it is new models. I mean, again, the same core gameplay is the same.
That's a good point. So I'll have to retract my previous statement and agree with you that I think you're right. The first one is an HD
upgrade or however
you want to phrase it, and this one is an actual remaster. I agree with that. Yeah, because I forgot about the character models. I do remember seeing that they actually redid a lot of the character models.
Because even Ellie's character model looks more like the actual actress as opposed to Ellen Page.
Yeah.
which was a whole thing for when Last of Us came out.
Oh boy, I remember that. It's Elliot Page now, by the way.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
I forgot.
I want to,
Yes.
because it was Ellen Page at the time, but he has since transitioned. So
Yes.
we do not want a dead name if we can avoid it. So
My apologies.
no, you're fine. You're fine.
But so yeah, it is like new models and stuff. To give it a little bit more credit, there is some cool accessibility options.
Yeah.
There's colorblind modes and other stuff that just wasn't really thought of back in the day.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like it's just literally the same game. I mean, gameplay wise, it is, but
Yeah.
they did add some more stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
And-
So that by definition, yeah, that definitely falls more under the remaster category.
Again, remaster.
Yeah. Not.
But
remake.
the box says remake.
Yeah.
And again, I do feel a lot of like why it came out was because Sony probably pushed it for the HBO show.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I get the marketing side of that.
Yeah.
Like, especially with the amount of positive reception the show has gotten. Well, from most people, but we're not going to talk about any of those idiots who didn't like it. So.
Yeah, no, but I do think they put it out right before the show came out, so people would buy it at full price.
Yeah.
The hardcores. Then everyone who watches the show is going to buy it, and then they did put it on sale during the airing of the show.
Yeah.
To get, if anyone who hadn't bought it already, to get them in.
Yeah. Which, again, great marketing.
So,
like, shitty move, but great marketing.
Yeah, so as far as marketing, it makes 100% sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So not throwing Naughty Dog totally under the bus, but at the same time...
Only partially. Just their legs.
Yeah,
just their legs.
Just their legs. You can still... You're not dead, just,
you're crippled for a little while.
Just brutally mangled.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, I think... and then the PC port was supposed to come out, like, right after the show, but it got pushed, until here recently.
Yeah, well, and as we can tell, because you mentioned the PC port, Greg Miller fired a couple shots at PC owners over that today on Twitter.
Oh, really? I haven't seen his today.
Oh, it's pretty great. Yeah, he's been. This has been like a recurring here. For those who don't know, Greg Miller of Kind of Funny, formerly of IGN. He's a console guy, like first and foremost, always has been.
I resonate a lot with Greg Miller.
Yeah, and he likes to play the heel a lot of times. Bad guy, for those that are not familiar with wrestling terms.
I resonate a lot with Greg Miller.
And yeah, he basically sent out a series of tweets today about like, oh, I'm sorry that you're having problems with bugs on your PC port.
Yeah.
Traitors. Like, you know what I mean? Like, It's all good fun. And, I'm sure, like, I don't know Greg, so I can't speak if that's how he actually feels, but the dude's part of Kind of Funny, so I just can't see him being, like, a total asshat.
Yeah, no, he doesn't totally, like, exactly feel like that. Yeah. But they're still fucking traitors.
Yeah, well, hey, PC gamer here, so don't make me kick your ass off this podcast.
Oh, I know, right? But, so yeah, no, I do feel, while the Last of Us Part 1 remake should get some flack, but it's not just a lazy attempt at making more money.
No, like they did put a lot of work into it.
Yeah.
But it also comes at a time too where, there's a lot of discourse. Last of Us Part 2 obviously was very controversial for a lot of players. It really split the internet in a way I have rarely seen a video game do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the current culture war controversy around the Last of Us TV show by certain individuals who I will not name, but I will absolutely throw shade at because I think you're all fucking stupid. But yeah, it's one of those things where, like, obviously we're in a time period where people will just pick fights over just about anything.
Yeah, for sure.
And whether it's on the internet or what, but it is interesting again that why we kind of wanted to talk about this is because, for me, the Last of Us was really where I started paying attention to this like whole remake versus remaster debate, because I'm like, oh great, what are the Last of Us fans fighting about now? And I'm like looking, I'm like, oh great, it's something stupid, like it's over semantics.
Yeah.
But again, that's how we are. I mean, I also just had to listen to a debate about Star Wars today, and reminds me of the old adage, no one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans. And I say that as a Star Wars fan, someone who loves Star Wars very much.
Usually the fans are the fucking worst.
It really can get like that for sure, and Star Wars has definitely hit that point.
Star Wars or Pokemon fans?
Yeah, I'm not as big into the Pokemon community, but we did kind of talk about it a little bit with like Diamond and Pearl. We kind of hinted at it with the issues there. But yeah, it is interesting though too, because like there are so many games that have been remade, remastered, and again, like to kind of get into this debate over like semantics, it just feels really silly to me in a lot of ways, because it's like, look, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with like looking at a game like we talked RE3 before. Like if you were upset about Nemesis being turned into credits, like
the
cutscenes, then yeah, absolutely. Like I totally get that, because that was one of the scariest parts of the original game. And now it's kind of in a cutscene, and it's like, okay, like cool, you just have to let it play out instead of like actually like having
like
to
interact with
it, and like you're responsible. Like Nemesis could brutally murder you in the original RE3. Can't do that in the remake, which is until the boss fight anyway.
Yeah.
But so it kind of takes a little bit of the suspense away from that. And like in a horror game, you kind of need that suspense. So I get that criticism. But then on the flip side, if you're going to like go after like Naughty Dog for trying to capitalize on a very popular HBO TV show.
Well, they have like a whole marketing scheme, basically.
Yeah, again, there's criticism there. We talked about it. Like I think I even said it's pretty shitty practice to do, but again, like it's brilliant marketing, and I get it.
I mean, and people could always not buy the game, in this shitty marketing.
No, that's what I mean. Is like, I don't understand why so many people feel the need to just dump on things constantly.
But then they're usually the ones going out and buying the game.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is it's like, okay, like we talked about like this with like Iron Man 3 and with Thor: The Dark World. And it's like, yeah, we kind of dumped on those movies, but we also found a lot of like positive stuff in there too. It wasn't just like us like crapping on it for, like an hour. It was no, like we talked about like RDJ's great interactions. Like he has some of the best dialogue in Iron Man 3. What he did with Tony Stark, like single-handedly, like going in without his armor.
Yeah.
Like that was pretty badass.
Yeah.
Thor: The Dark World, like, okay, there wasn't a whole lot of positivity there, but we had that awesome, like, Loki interaction with Thor.
Yeah, the whole, like,
arguably
escape and heist or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. The getaway.
Yeah.
And, we had some good character interactions with, Thor with Frigga and Thor, and with Loki and Frigga. And
yeah.
There's bright sides to everything, and unfortunately it does feel like, especially in this type of debate, it's like, okay, remaster, remake, yes, there's going to be people who, are taking advantage of it, maybe mislabeling things like Last of Us, but at the end of the day, if you don't like it, just don't spend your money on it.
Yeah.
That's what I did. Like, I'm like, oh, they're re-releasing Last of Us for the third time? I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, cool, if someone else wants to buy it, that's pretty cool. Like,
but I mean, I can get it on my deck, man.
You can. But it's full of bugs, so I would wait.
Especially on the deck, I'm sure it's full of bugs.
But yeah, it's one of those things where, at the end of the day with this kind of debate, it's just interesting to see the discourse, and also kind of sad, because there's a lot of people like on the dev teams and in the marketing departments who, aren't necessarily the ones who are coming up with the ideas, but they're the ones taking the flack.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean with The Last of Us. Like, it's not the developer per se. If Sony, and again, I don't know for sure what happened.
Yeah, allegedly.
But if Sony's like, hey, like, the TV show's going to come out, we need something to come out with it, because it ain't going to be Last of Us 3.
Yeah.
Like, and they remade it that, because my understanding too is, Neil Druckmann, which is one of the main people like at Naughty Dog, had no part in the remake.
Yeah, and that happens too. In a lot of cases, we were talking about, was it? You mentioned, I think it was Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was a completely different team. So
Correct.
The original devs had nothing to do with it.
Not only team, it was a whole different studio. It was Ilka.
And then kind of talking like what we did with like Silent Hill a couple weeks ago. Remember how like the studio that did the first 4 games had nothing to do with a lot of the other games that fans are like poo-pooing.
Yeah.
So it's just a reminder, I guess, if I just want to kind of take a minute to step on my soapbox here. It's just, be kind, be thoughtful. Remember that people who are working on this may not necessarily be making the decisions behind things. And the best way you can ever hold someone accountable if you're feeling critical is don't frickin' buy it.
Yeah.
But with that said, I'm going to step up my soapbox. Let's kind of talk about some of the remakes, remasters, reboots, whatever, and maybe we'll talk about like spiritual successors to kind of wrap up the pod.
Sure.
So, for me, the most like notable quote unquote remake that I remember, like at least the earliest one, is we talked about was like Super Mario Brothers Deluxe on the Game Boy Color, which originally came out on the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. and that was about a decade and several consoles later. But another one was like Resident Evil got remade pretty early compared to
Resident
like when
Evil
it was
did.
released.
Metal Gear did in the same like era. You can argue Star Fox 64.
Yeah, because they that's actually a full remake. They had to like rebuild it for the 3DS.
Yeah, like it's
Yeah.
no, not even the 3DS, the 64,
Oh, that's right.
because it's based off the original game.
Yeah, from the NES. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, technically, legally speaking, in Star Fox we had Star Fox for the NES,
Yeah.
or was it Super Nintendo?
It might have been Super Nintendo.
I think Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I was wrong. So.
You had that. Star Fox 2 never came out until the mini or classic Super Nintendo
Yeah,
classic.
that went into development hell, so they basically just remade it and called it Star Fox 64.
Yeah, they like remade basically Star Fox 1,
Yeah.
called it 64, and everyone thought it was a new game, but it's still just the same game.
Yeah, it's virtually the same game.
Then that got remade on the Wii U and is now known as Star Fox Zero that everyone poo-poos on too.
Yeah.
Which I really do want to play that game one day.
Well, didn't they re-release it for the 3DS as well?
And then, yeah, they re-released it on the 3DS.
Yeah, and that
But
was
that
like,
one is kind of up to the debate. It's more of a remaster, because it's not a remake per se.
Well, they had to rebuild the original source code for that.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, so that's why I call it a remake. But it is more like a remaster. Like,
Yeah, if they
from,
didn't
from
lose
a game,
the source code.
yeah, from a gameplay perspective, it's pretty much like the same.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's
So, like, basically Star Fox original, technically,
Yeah.
but most people know it as 64, has been, like, the same, like, game in the entire franchise. There hasn't been a whole lot of other games.
Yeah.
We got
Star Fox Adventures.
Adventures and Assault.
Yeah.
And that's about it. There's, like, 3 games in the Star Fox timeline.
Yeah, really. And the funny part is, still eating better than F-Zero fans.
Got him!
Sorry, F-Zero fans. Like,
Oh.
I don't hate you, but I'm just speaking hard facts. Nintendo does not care about you. I'm
They
sorry.
don't give any fucks.
No, they really don't.
Like, once Captain Falcon, like, as a character makes it into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it's fucking over.
Right? Yeah, you're just never gonna see
Like,
an F-Zero game.
what's
ever
even the
again.
fucking point at that time?
I mean, the closest they got is they did bring like Big Blue and
No, they have the tracks.
yeah, they brought him in as tracks. I'm like, that's I think the closest F-Zero fans are
Yeah,
gonna get. Unfortunately,
But that's what I'm saying. If Captain Falcon makes it in 2, why even make an F-Zero game? It's the same shit at that point.
Pretty much. But,
But yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy when you think about, because this shit has been happening, since the N64.
yeah.
But wasn't coined that way
No,
back in the day.
And the big difference too is that like also we're at a point, we talked about this a bit, but like we are at a point where like from a visual perspective, it's going to be hard to, there's not going to be like as many giant leaps. Like we went from like pixel art, like 32-bit like pixel art, 8-bit, 16-bit, 64-bit to 3D polygons to 3D HD, and now it's like, okay, we've kind of hit a point where we're like, in like 40K, visuals, and it's like, well, the human eye can't really discern much better than that, so there isn't going to be like this next giant leap, so it made a bit more sense, plus there were also issues which we, kind of hinted at with like Super Mario Brothers 2 here in the United States with like localization and games that never made it over here. Fire Emblem was a big one where it literally only came over because they were included in Melee.
Yeah.
And then everyone was like, who are these characters?
Yeah. Who the fuck are these guys? I mean, I love these guys, but who the fuck are they?
Yeah.
I'm one of those people.
Yeah. It's him. He's people.
Yep.
But yeah, and then, so we're talking, like we kind of touched on like the HD collection. There was a couple like Devil May Cry and,
Metal Gear.
Metal Gear. Technically, the Halo Master Chief collection is like that as well.
They did Gears of War.
Yeah, Gears of War, and that was a big like in the mid 2000s where like basically it was like in the 90s they were like recreating like pixel games into 3D. In a lot of ways, like Star Fox to Star Fox 64.
Yeah.
Then they went from like tank controls to more flexible controls and HD makeovers because like the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 were like the first like HD consoles.
Yeah.
And
Not
then,
the Wii.
Yeah, not the Wii. And Nintendo, as a Nintendo fan, I will argue that Nintendo still doesn't have an HD console.
Legally speaking, they do.
Yeah, legally they do, but I will argue that they don't because The Nintendo Switch is basically like where the PSP was, as far as like power and graphics.
It's pretty similar to that Vita that died. Yes.
Yeah. So.
R.I.P. the. Speaking of Greg Miller, R.I.P. the Vita.
Yeah, R.I.P. the Vita. But and so then now we're kind of in a spot where a lot of these older games, and there was actually a court case with like Internet Archive about like who has the rights to these older games when like companies are not doing anything with them or selling. There's like this big legal question, and source code is getting lost. So they're like, and there's games that.
Well, back in the day, they're like, why the fuck do I need this source code?
Yeah.
Whoop! And throw it in the trash can.
Yeah, like that landful of E.T. games they found out in the desert.
That's so funny. That was a real thing, by the way.
Oh yeah, 100%, but understandable because that game is awful.
Yeah.
I have had the misfortune of playing that game.
I've never played it. I've seen it.
Yeah, when I took courses for game design in college.
They made you play it?
Yeah, they had us play it. We jumped from E.T. to Mass Effect. That was a big jump, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that fucking is.
An original Mass Effect. Not Mass Effect 2, not Mass Effect 3. Original Mass Effect.
That's still a huge jump.
Yeah. But
you probably think Mass Effect's a masterpiece after that.
Oh, it is.
It's just...
Yeah. People wonder, like, oh, what's your masterpiece? Oh, it's Mass Effect.
Huh.
Why? Because I played it after the E.T. game.
Yeah. Because first I played E.T.
Yeah.
Then fucking anything's awesome after that.
Oh, God. Yeah. If you've never played that game, just look up video on it. It's awful.
Yeah.
And again, we don't want to like talk too negatively about like the developers, so I'm sure worked really hard, but that game is really bad.
Wasn't it just like one dude? I've seen the what happened on it. It's been a while.
I don't remember all the details, so I don't want to like
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't want to open us up to like a lawsuit, but yeah. Long story short, not a good game. But yeah, so now it's like, okay, we have all these new games, and it's like there's definitely an appetite for nostalgia.
Yes.
And whenever we do our Nintendo podcast, we're going to talk about how much money Nintendo loses per year on not capitalizing on that.
Nintendo hates money.
A great example, is with Nintendo is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe versus Mario Kart 8. Mm-hmm. The original Mario Kart 8 was released on the Wii U. Yeah. And for those who have been living under a rock or who are not super familiar with like console sales,
the Wii U was the first HD Nintendo console.
Yes,
legally speaking.
And it's also the one that no one ever talks about because the Wii U was a colossal failure. It was arguably Nintendo's biggest failure since like
the
Virtual Boy, like back in like the 90s.
Minor details.
Yeah. It's a huge disappointment, which is a shame because I actually liked the Wii U. I thought it was a good step, but the Switch is what the Wii U should have been.
Correct. No, I think that's like, at first, why the Switch was so incredibly popular, because it's what everyone wanted from the Wii U, and then it was real.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's...
And now Steam Deck has kind of copied that, but I will also make the argument as a Nintendo fanboy, certified Nintendo fanboy.
Oh, certified? They sent you the seal?
Yeah, I have
Nintendo seal of approval, that gold stamp?
Hey, I still have my working Nintendo 64. If that doesn't make me a certified Nintendo fanboy, I don't know what does at this point.
I had to sell my Wii U to buy a new PS4.
I still have the Wii U too.
Yeah,
so
I'm sad.
But yeah,
I bought every game pretty much. Port Star Fox Zero, you cowards!
Right, but it's funny because the. I'll argue that the PSP, not the Vita, the PSP was like what the Switch is basically was way before. Like the PSP is basically everything the Switch is, but like a decade earlier.
My only disagreement, the PSP only had one stick.
That is true, but I'm just saying as far as like the concept and like behind it, because like there's some really good games that came out on the PSP, and then the Vita improved on that. Like, the PSP in a lot of ways is like a better version of what the Wii U was, and then the Vita is like what the Switch should have... Well, the Switch is what Vita should have been if Vita had gotten the support and backup it needed. But that's another story. But yeah, so now we're seeing like, like with Nintendo with like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it's virtually the same game. Like it's identical.
Yeah, I mean,
they just
the graphics are maybe better, question mark?
Slightly. It's hard to tell with Nintendo consoles.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Even the graphics aren't much different.
Yeah. Like there has been a notable jump since like the GameCube to the Switch.
Correct. No, of course.
Man, like you look at it like in order and it's like...
It's really hard to tell.
It's like if Sony and Microsoft were taking like leaps, Nintendo is like taking steps with their graphics.
Yeah.
But so like Deluxe is, something that again, we talk about like not backing it with its money. Like, Deluxe is the same game. They just re-released it on the Switch. They now added DLC to it.
They gave you all the DLC.
Yeah.
Which I already had previously purchased, but I was like, well, fuck it. Like,
yeah.
And then that was it for what, 3-4 years?
Yeah, and then now they have this DLC that's still ongoing.
Uh-huh.
And again, that's a whole different thing we'll talk about with Nintendo and their DLC, but...
Yeah, but that was the most confusing part to me. I was like, okay,
yeah,
we have 8 Deluxe. That'll hold us over till Mario Kart 9 and, like, for a couple years.
And now here we are, like, a decade later, and Mario Kart 9 isn't even, like, there's no sign of it.
Yeah, it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
We're now been steadily getting DLC for 2... Has it been 2 years?
I think just about, but they're only, like, halfway done with the DLC.
Yeah.
I think they just passed the halfway point with
But,
the
like,
latest
5 years
release.
later, they start releasing DLC.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, so is this a new game? Is this, still just the Wii U Mario Kart 8?
I still think of it as the Wii U Mario Kart 8. It just has some minor improvements, so I wouldn't even I wouldn't even call it an HD like paint job.
Yeah, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying now with all this extra content.
Yeah, it's a port.
But they've improved upon it and added so much more stuff is what I'm getting at.
For sure, but that again, when they re-released the game, it was just a port.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It was a port with the DLC. It was basically like a collector's edition.
Correct. I'm just saying now because we've had 2 years of DLC, like it's this weird, like how do you place it?
Yeah, pretty much. And since we kind of talked about some bad games, let's talk about some really good ones. That kind of fall into this. So like some really good like remasters / remakes, depending on how you look at it. Spyro and Crash, which we talked about. Like
Crash was so good, it got a new game.
Yeah.
Crash 4, it's dick time. I mean, about time.
Yeah.
I just love the way they underlined it. Anyway. But yes, we ended up getting Crash 4. So everyone was actually waiting for a new Spyro. Never happened.
And probably won't.
So sad. But yeah, we got those.
But those are good examples of like, I think they're remasters. They basically took the original game and they prettied it up and made it better and ported it onto a new console.
Yeah, because you had your original PS1 game. Well, some of the Crash games were PS2, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Crash 1 and 2 were both on PlayStation, if I remember correctly.
PS1, but Crash 3 was on PS2.
Crash 3 was on PS2, yeah.
But then they made them all, gave it like its own uniform, like graphical style.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, everything is more or less like remade.
Yeah.
But then it's still the same general gameplay.
Yeah.
People whined it was too hard. I'm like, dude, did you play on the PS1 back in the day?
Yeah, I was about to say.
You didn't even have a stick to move. You had to use the fucking D-pad.
Yeah.
My dude.
But it's pretty funny because, like, again, I look at both of those as, like, good examples of, like, what a remake / remaster can be because it's like you took a beloved series that hasn't gotten a lot of love in both Spyro and Crash over the years. You brought it to a more modern audience. You prettied it up. You re-released it on a brand new console. And in Crash's case, you actually got a 4th game out of it, which is pretty sweet. And, with Spyro, like, Spyro kind of has gotten caught up in all the... what's it called? The part of like was it like the Dreamlanders or whatever? It was like the figures. Skylanders, that's what it was. I knew you would know, but
I never did play Skylanders. I won a copy of Skylanders and still never played it, but that's a whole separate aside.
Yeah, I don't think Skylanders is even still a thing. Like,
no.
I think they shut it down, but yeah, it's like Spyro kind of got caught up in that.
Yes.
And
no, because that originally was Spyro.
Yeah.
And then it just turned into Skylanders. And Crash eventually did make an appearance in Skylanders.
Yeah, but...
because Activision owns both.
Yes. But, so they brought those back.
Oh shit, if Xbox buys Activision, they're going to own Crash and Spyro.
Yeah, they will. And hopefully they won't do them as dirty as they did Banjo-Kazooie.
Hopefully.
Oh, nuts and bolts. Nuts and bolts, man. Okay, we're talking positive.
Sorry.
Positive thoughts.
Happy thoughts.
So yeah, and then like we're talking like arguably like the best remakes. RE2 jumps out. And we talked a lot about this in like the the Resident Evil podcast. We talked a lot about it with Grayson when he was here. But like RE2 is one of those games where just like they literally took a game that was already good and they made everything better.
But they again brought it up to the like a current audience.
Yep.
Because before, like, the whole gameplay is different.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that's the same about it other than you play as Leon and Claire.
Yeah.
And the story beats are generally the same, but you know what I'm getting at.
But they did add a couple new things in there, and...
But, like, the way you move, I mean, it's third person behind the shoulder, not
Yeah.
the
Fixed camera.
Yeah, fixed camera angle, omniscient.
Omnipotent.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
And just everything about it was pretty much different.
Yeah. But for the better.
Correct.
And then the other one that jumps out to me as like one of the greatest remakes ever, and we talked about it earlier as it's being like in its own category, is Final Fantasy VII. Where they literally took it, and while a lot of the story beats are the same, like they also basically just said, hey, that original story, we're going to kind of follow it, and the general beats are going to hit the same, but we're also going to totally throw everything out the window and just do our own thing.
In the second half of that game, they're like, fuck you, we're doing our own shit.
Yep, pretty much.
Like, that's the whole second half of that game.
But yeah, they built up and made you care more about, like, the 3 Avalanche members.
Because they stuck to, like, the first disc of the game, they were able to elaborate on so much, and people thought, like, that was the only difference.
Yeah. But
like, and marketing-wise, they did a very good job. They didn't, blow their load before the game came out. They kind of just said, okay, it's just going to be this, but don't worry, like, it's still a full, complete game. And people are like, how the fuck is it a full, complete game when it's only a third of the game?
And then they played it, and they're like, oh.
That's how it's the full, complete game.
Oh, I see.
I remember talking to Haseo about it. He's like, I've played the game before. I know what happens. I said, no, you fucking don't.
Yeah.
You don't know a fucking thing that happens in this game.
And then he borrowed the game for how long from you?
He still legally has it, even though now it's in my house again.
Yeah, I was going to say it's back in your house again.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, though. But, like, when I look at, like, what remakes are, like, that's to me, like, the peak. I can't really talk about RE4 because I haven't seen a lot of it yet.
I've seen some RE4. My personal opinion, it's even better than RE2 as far as remake is concerned.
Oh, wow. That's high praise. Grayson didn't feel the same way.
Really?
Yeah, he... I think he says it kind of falters a bit in the second half, which is what RE4 did originally.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that was how RE4 was back in the day.
Yeah.
But I've heard... Again, I haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah, so let's not comment on it too much, but I'm just saying that's what he said. So.
Yeah, I've heard they've made improvements to make the second half better, but I'll have to see.
Yeah, Grayson said it didn't help. So it wasn't enough, in his opinion.
Okay.
Like, and he doesn't hate it. Like, he likes it, he thinks it's a good game, but, like, he's just like, he still likes RE2 better. Like, it's a more complete game. But we'll see, obviously, when you get a chance to play it. We'll have to follow up on that at some point. But,
yeah, I just know, personally, I like the gameplay style better.
Yeah, well, that's good.
I know they've...
But you also favor the more action-y, like, cheese, as we talked about in the Resident Evil.
And they made this more action-y and more cheese.
Yeah, so that, whereas, like, with RE2, they still kept, like, suspense and stuff.
Yeah.
They made it a little bit more action-y in the remake, but...
Yeah.
Not enough to... They didn't remove, like, a lot of the horror and the suspense, so it's just different styles, probably. Because Grayson likes that better than the action-y stuff. So.
And I can fucking parry shit now.
Yeah, so there you go. Oh, you can also stomp in RE4 Remake. I did see that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. That just gives me RE6 vibes. But we won't go down that path again. We already talked a lot about RE6 in the RE pod. But yeah, so I mean, those to me are like the two, like what I would put is like, my highlights for remakes, and like actual remakes where they rebuilt the game from scratch, added new stuff, expanded on it. Like it meets every definition, both the back end and the gamer side. So. For me, like, that's what I would think. What about you? What would be, like, your, like, top picks for, like, remakes right now?
Yeah, I mean, as far as modern day, I can't argue not having RE2 and, Final Fantasy VII up there.
Yeah.
I do know, again, I brought up Star Fox 64.
Yeah.
Which, again, we never thought of it that way.
No, but if you look at it through the strict definition, you're not wrong.
Yeah, so. Like... I feel like you do have to give that some props as far as for what it is.
I mean, I still love Star Fox 64. It's like one of those games I wish I had a copy of, but I don't.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing game. Just, yeah, again, we didn't know that it was, strictly speaking, it was a remake.
Yeah.
And then, what was I going to say?
Should I come back to you?
I guess. I don't know. I thought I had another point, but I guess not.
Well, we are kind of approaching the 1 hour mark here, so I did want to talk a little bit about like spiritual successors, because we did talk about that and we kind of mentioned it. So spiritual successors are a really interesting case, because kind of like where this debate over like what makes a remake versus a remaster has been going on, whether a spiritual successor is successful or not also seems to be a subject of great debate. And where do they kind of fit in with this like port, remake, remaster, HD collection bullshit. And it's something I just think of as like Mighty Number 9. It's like a great example of like, it's supposed to be the spiritual successor to Mega Man.
Yeah, a great / horrible example.
And it just didn't work. And, you know, there's some where we talked about like, you know, aspects of like core gameplay get changed and sometimes it works, like in Final Fantasy VII Remake. But then you have like Mighty Number 9, which didn't embody like the core spirit of like Mega Man, and that's why it didn't work. So it's really weird when you look at that because like the definition like between like, you know, failure and success is pretty crazy. And then you have like for Banjo-Kazooie, like Yooka-Laylee was the spiritual successor to that. And that did, you know, okay.
Yeah, I remember Yooka-Laylee coming out and people complaining, oh, it's too much like Banjo-Kazooie. Like, it still has the same problems.
Yeah,
it's
and everyone's like, that's what you asked for!
Yeah, the developers are sitting there, like, probably literally pulling their hair out. Like, you said you wanted Banjo motherfucking Kazooie.
So we gave it to you.
And now you're complaining about it?
Yeah.
But then they came out with Yooka-Laylee in the Secret Lair.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, a 2D platformer as opposed to the 3D, and then people loved it.
Yeah.
You know, so...
It's really weird. It's just, it's so strange how that works, and... You know, it's something with spiritual successors where there seems to be a very fine line, at least to me, where like you have to embody like the core aspects of what captured the original game, but you can't make it identical.
Yeah.
And that's such a fine line to walk because like, especially for like games like Banjo-Kazooie, it's like, okay, so what would you consider like the core aspects of the game, if not like the gameplay and the mechanics? Is it the characters? Is it the dialogue? Is it the soundtrack? And that's a lot harder to pin down because that's abstract.
Yes.
So, you know, we talk about like, you know, and why I kind of wanted to save spiritual successor for less is because my argument was going to be, again, looking at it from the way I do with like remakes, remasters, and like the source code and stuff like that, like that's way more abstract and that's way harder to pin down. Because it's like, again, for me, it's pretty clear. If you're rebuilding the source code, you're changing things up in the core storyline, it's a remake. If you're just slapping a new coat of paint on it, it's a remaster. And then, you know, if you're just literally taking the exact same game and making no changes to it other than you're putting it on a new console, that's a port. Very straightforward, simple definitions.
Yes.
But then when you're creating a spiritual successor, it doesn't really fall into those definitions.
No, but it is still kind of the same core concept, though.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, which is why I wanted to bring it up. And, you know, you mentioned it actually in a text message. You were the one who brought it up, and I'm like, I want to include this in our pod.
Oh, okay.
Because you were like, we can probably talk about that. I'm like, oh, no, we're going to bring it up now.
Yeah, I mean, my most famous spiritual successor to me is the Bayonetta franchise.
Yeah, Bayonetta is a great example of that.
You know, I mean, there's too many parallels. I mean, it's Team Little Angels as opposed to Team Little Devils.
Yes.
That made the game. I mean, they did that on purpose.
That's a wink and a nod.
Yeah.
That's wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
And you fight angels in the first game instead of demons.
Yes.
Like, they made everything the opposite.
Yeah, they just inversed it. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make it better. I mean, you know, the main character is a female.
Yeah.
Which is still badass, but like, yeah, it's not the same. But, you know, it was... But it was not the same gameplay. I mean...
No, they switched it up enough, but, like, it is a great example of a spiritual successor, like you said, is they got a lot of winks and nudges, and they captured that, you know, like in wrestling, they call it, like, the it factor, right? It's like who becomes a big star. They have it, and no one can really define what it is. And I have yet to come up with, like, a working formula for spiritual successors, because I've seen some where I'm like, hey... This is pretty awesome. But then I hear complaints like it's literally the same game. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, so I've been playing on stream lately. I've been playing Bug Fables, the Everlasting Sapling. And that is, in my opinion, a spiritual successor to the original Paper Mario games. Like,
I mean, it looks like it too, even just visually.
Yeah, visually, but it echoes visually. The gameplay is almost identical. Not quite, because they didn't want Nintendo to sue them. But they added a third partner because, you know, like Paper Mario and Thousand Year Door, you only had one partner, but now you have two. So it's like, there's a lot of like the same stuff, and I personally love it because I loved the original Paper Mario and Thousand Year Door. But, you know, and it's not to say that I don't enjoy like Super Paper Mario, but Sticker Star was not great, and I tried to get into the newest one.
Oh, Origami King?
Origami King, and I had to stop playing it because I'm like, it's not that fun. To me.
Okay.
Like it's a step in the right direction from like Sticker Star, but I'm just like it didn't capture what I liked about what I liked about the original Paper Marios.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much, but it looks interesting, and they tried to shake up the general gameplay formula. But...
Yeah, and again, it's not for me. I'm not going to say it's a bad game because I know a lot of people who love it, but I'm just like, it's not what I want. So I'm going to sit here and play, Bug Fables instead because Bug Fables is everything I wanted. So, but again, like that's you can't really pin that down. So I look at like Bug Fables, if not like a spiritual successor, then definitely like a tribute.
Yeah,
and
which I think that's kind of the vibe you need as a spiritual successor.
Yeah,
like you're specifically like trying to hit that same vibe and not make your own completely different thing.
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of it's like it's a fine line between like how much of the original you bring over, and again that's why I call it like that it factor. Like to get a good spiritual successor, you kind of have to be tapped into like the core of like what the game felt, and
yeah, and
that can be really hard to create.
And then there's other ones too, like I know Evil Within.
Evil Within, yeah, I remember that one.
They were trying to do a Resident Evil-esque thing, but then, it was okay, but like it didn't hit like critical success.
Yeah.
Because it got 2 games.
Yeah, which honestly, if you can get a sequel, that's a success in my opinion.
Yeah.
But, again, Thor: The Dark World got a sequel, so I don't know if that's necessarily the best comparison.
Oh, yeah, I feel that's different, but yes. You're not wrong.
Point being, just because something get a sequel doesn't automatically make it good.
Huh.
Or even better, all the Resident Evil movies got like how many sequels?
Oh my god. But yeah,
listen to our Resident Evil podcast, available now on YouTube.
And then, strictly speaking, isn't BioShock a spiritual successor of System Shock?
I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not like the biggest BioShock fan, and I don't know anything about System Shock.
Yeah, so. I've only really played Infinite.
Yeah.
Like, I went through and beat that. But, yeah, I would say, and you're wrong, tell me you're wrong, but that sounds kind of funny. We don't have a you're wrong.
No, we do not. Not yet, anyway.
But yeah, in the comments, correct me, but I'm pretty sure BioShock is a spiritual successor.
Yeah, it could be. Again, like, definitely, and that's also the other thing is where do you draw the line between, like, influenced by and then outright spiritual successor?
Well, yeah, because I think BioShock's a good one, too, because it's more popular, than its original source material. Again, if I'm correct.
Yeah, well, like,
to
use Bug Fables, like, would you technically call that a spiritual successor because it's not under the Nintendo banner? It's a different developer who just, like, is paying tribute to Paper Mario?
Well, see, that was kind of my definition of a spiritual successor, is it's not the people who made it, per se, or, the same company.
Well, so that's, I guess, where spiritual successor, right, can differ, right? And again, we're getting down to semantics again.
Yeah, because, again, Bayonetta was not Capcom.
Yeah.
It was a lot of people who used to work on Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
And were ex-Capcom employees.
Yes.
But they legally can't make Devil May Cry, so they made Bayonetta.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of... And the same thing with Evil Within.
Yep.
Like, is where... My kind of definition is usually it's not... Because, if it was the same company, they can just reboot it, and use the same IP.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't own the IP, so you're making something different that's like still has the same vibe.
Yeah, and that's again where I go back to like it's more abstract because you're trying to recreate that feeling or that same sense, and not everybody perceives things the same way, but like most people, for example, like I compare it to like listening to music, right? Like the beauty of something like music and like even art is you don't necessarily have to speak the language or understand like the words, the lyrics, or even what's written on the page. You can generally get a vibe for what feeling that artist is trying to create by, what instruments they use, what notes they play, what art style, what expressions they are drawing on, what colors they use. There's lots of indicators that can help you there. Whereas in video game media, it's the same but different. Because I think everyone would agree that like music and art are both a part of what makes a video game, but they're not the whole. So you can have like Paper Mario art style, but that doesn't necessarily make it a Paper Mario-esque game. You just have the same art style, or you have similar music. But then you go in and like the game plays exactly the same. It feels the same. You have the combat, the partner system, like okay, now you're starting to get kind of the same like core features that had Paper Mario. You just have different characters, a different storyline. But like even the way they did like the chapter system is exactly how Paper Mario used to be. So, it's tough for me to say as someone who like doesn't necessarily think a lot in the abstract how to pin that down. And it's tough because as we've seen, like even when you have like people who really care about it, just because it's quote unquote sold as a spiritual successor doesn't necessarily mean it will get accepted. Looking at you, Mighty Number 9.
Can you believe the audacity of that motherfucker? Before the game came out, he had another Kickstarter for a second game.
That's a whole nother story though, but yeah, just not a great look.
Oh
not
shit!
A great look for sure.
I just realized we went through this whole podcast and we did not even mention like the studio that does remakes, Bluepoint.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to bring that up.
Yeah, I was going to. I think maybe that was the point I was going to bring. The
Probably the Bluepoint.
I should need to go to hell now.
Yeah, but on that note, we should probably wrap up the podcast. No, but let's make your point about Bluepoint.
Yeah, no, just as far as I've heard a lot of talk too of Konami maybe remaking something.
Yeah, so they're going to hire Bluepoint.
Which everyone's like, hire fucking Bluepoint.
Yeah, because they seem to have really stumbled on.
They have a great success.
The formula.
Making other people shit, like, for lack of better words.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, like, let's list off a couple, right? They have,
Well, I know for sure they have...
Oh my god, I just drew a blank, I'm sorry.
Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, Shadow of the Colossus, that's what I was thinking of. And that was a great...
remake.
Great remake. 100%.
They have Shadow of the Colossus.
Yep.
They made Demon Souls.
Yep, and they did a good job with that one, too.
Didn't they have one in between those?
Probably. Let me see.
And then...
If only we had a device about yay big.
And you could go on the internet.
Yep.
And
I'm gonna Google it because I'm legitimately like drawing a total blank here.
I know because I know they have more than just the two.
Yeah, so it's Bluepoint Games, not Studios.
Yeah, my bad.
At least I'm pretty sure.
But yeah, no, they're like totally the kings of.
So they did
remakes.
Uncharted, the Nathan Drake collection.
Oh, okay.
Shadow of the Colossus and Demon Souls are their like three big ones. Yeah, that's it so far.
Okay. But I mean, still, like, the Uncharted collection is, again, it's not bad.
Yeah, and they started off, just so you guys know, they started off with the ports of God of War and God of War 2 to the God of War collection to the PlayStation 3. So that's where they got their start. So they started off on, like, pretty solid,
Yeah, again, none of it was bad. They just were the port team.
Yeah.
But then...
And they've also done remastered HD versions. They did Metal Gear Solid HD collection.
Oh, they did do the Metal Gear Solid HD collection.
Yeah, they worked with PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which, was a different take on Smash. It wasn't necessarily the success that it should have been, but...
Yeah, I'll agree with you there for sure.
Yeah, and they did Gravity Rush Remastered, which was a Japan release, I think. But yeah, they did Demon Souls, and... Yeah, they're...
Yeah, I know they came out with Gravity Rush on the PS4 here in the States.
Yeah,
because it was originally a Vita game.
Yes. And yeah, they did support on Titanfall.
Oh, okay.
And they also did support on God of War Ragnarok. So, like, they have a pretty impressive resume for, like, such a small
the port
studio.
team, basically,
Yeah.
But yeah, like, Shadow of the Colossus, fucking banger. Demon Souls, I heard, too, for the first, several years of the PS5 being out, that was, like, the next-gen PS5 game was the remake of the PS3 game.
Yeah. Demon Souls, I think, as far as, like, PS5 launch titles, was, if not the best, it was one of the best.
Yeah, like, you want to see what your PS5 can do?
Yeah, this is
put in
it.
Demon Souls.
Yeah, so, great track record, and, again, it just goes to show that, like, there is a market in all this. Like, underneath all the debate, all the discord, all the, anger over semantics, because that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
There's a market there. And, like, even Nintendo, which is, like, super freaking slow to pick up on anything, it seems. Like, they still are behind on the internet, for God's sakes. They're releasing Advance Wars.
Yeah, 1 and 2.
1 and 2, which, is, like...
About time.
Yeah, finally. So... there's definitely a market there. And, again, like, we've talked about, like, some of them weren't necessarily great, but there's also been some really good ones, too. Like, we talked about it. Final Fantasy VII, RE2, RE4.
RE3 wasn't
Demon
good, but
Souls,
it still, like,
Shadow
made
of the
money.
Colossus, yeah. RE3, like, there's a market out there for this, and there's a lot of people who are working really hard. And for me as a supporter of the game industry, like I want to see good stuff.
Yeah, and then I know numbers are obviously going to be different once this airs, but I heard Resident Evil 4 sold 3 million copies in the first weekend,
Yeah,
which is like cool. 3 times as much as it made back in the day.
Yeah.
Granted, the video game market is way different.
Oh yeah,
back then,
it's night and day. But...
because that was also back in the day when it was on GameCube by itself.
Yeah.
Remember that was a GameCube exclusive?
Yes, I do remember that, and we blew. I think Samurai blew our minds in Resident Evil with Resident Evil on the N64. That was something I forgot about.
But I know. I saw on Twitter it was like poorly aged things.
Yeah.
And it was just the cover of Resident Evil 4, like only for GameCube.
Yeah.
And like that game has been. And actually, that game has been ported to fucking everything.
It has, yeah.
We mentioned that some too on the RE podcast.
Yeah.
It's been ported. It was on the GameCube.
Yes.
It was ported to the PS2.
Yes.
It was ported to the PS3.
Yep.
Was it ported to the 360 as well?
I think so.
I think so, because I think it was in the anthology, which I ended up getting.
It was on the anthology collection. I think
for 6, because there was the 6 anthology.
Yeah.
That came with every RE.
Yes.
Then
that was a really good deal at the time too.
Yes, I got said deal.
Yeah.
And then it came out on the PS4 as a standalone game.
Yeah.
Again, only $20 at the time, so like you couldn't be too mad. But it came out on that. It came out on your phone. It came out on everything. It was remade for the Oculus.
Yep, I remember that.
And then now they remade it. They did a remake, and now they're gonna port this over to the PSVR 2.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Resident Evil, man. Resident Evil.
But
so what did you say? It's infectious and spreading across all the consoles?
Yeah.
All right. So on that note, so this I think was a pretty good conversation. We got to talk a lot about we didn't. I'm proud that we didn't just get tripped up over all the freaking semantics. And this is how we define it. This is what we're gonna go for, and we're gonna make our points and talk about different games. But this was a really good conversation. So Shoshima, thank you so much for coming up with this topic.
Yeah, of course.
I think this was a great idea.
Yeah, I found it interesting too how we can come with same general thought process, but have the different sides of the argument, between the two of us.
Well, it's just, again, it's different perspectives, right? Because I do it full time. You're a full time gamer, basically. You don't work.
I wish it was full time gaming.
Shoshima Twitch stream coming soon? Question mark.
But
with that said, though, thank you again very much for being here. Thanks for having this discussion. This was fun. This is, I think, definitely going to be like a sleeper episode for sure.
Probably.
But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed it very much.
But go watch it, you fucking cowards.
Or listen. Still working on that.
Whatever, however you want to consume it, consume me.
Whatever floats your goat.
Yep, pretty much.
But don't consume him. You'll have a tummy ache.
We should have a secret word for the end of this episode, see if people actually made it. Since it's such a sleeper hit.
That's so much work. I don't want to.
I don't want to think of a word. We've been talking for over an hour.
Yeah, and I've been trying to wrap up for 20. So let's wrap up. With that said, my name is Shenzo the Lost. That is Shoshima 1016.
Yo.
Thank you very much for listening / watching. We will see you again next week, assuming that we survive, which should be actually our first ever live recording of the Lost One podcast.
It should be, yes.
Should be. So hopefully you guys will enjoy, and we will see you there. Bye-bye!
But if you made it this far, tell Sean Kelly Bolin he's a coward.
Don't tell